Right, welcome everyone. This is our second episode of EdTech Currents. It's Monday, February 20th, 2017, and I'm here with my friend and colleague, Dr. Mike DeSchryver from Central Michigan University. Hi, Mike. How are you doing tonight?
Good, thank you.
Fantastic. So I'm going to give everyone just a little bit of background about our program, a little bit about our guest tonight, find out a bit more about how you've made it to this point in your educational journey, both as a student and as an educator, Mike. And then we're going to be treated to hear quite a bit about ideas related to play and creativity and the use of the web for teaching. So let me kind of jump in here for just a moment and share a little bit of background about our series and about this show tonight. So let's get my Google Hangout window working. Here we go. We're going to go ahead and screen share. And what we are doing with this series is that we are CMU students and faculty affiliated with the Educational Technology Program. Of course, the views expressed here are not those of the university, although we do share a number of like-minded views with the university, but we get to talk about those things that we enjoy talking about tonight and thinking about EdTech now and in the future. And so you can find out more information and updated blog posts at edtechcurrents.wordpress.com. This month, as I mentioned, we are going to be speaking with Mike DeSchryver. He is an assistant, soon to be, I believe, associate professor of educational technology and the director of our Doctor of Educational Technology program, what we refer to as the DET. And of course, I'll have him tell just a little bit more about himself in a moment here. And then next month, we will also be on the 20th of March, just like we are here on the 20th of February. We are going to invite one of our students and also someone who does a good deal of work right here at CMU in the STEM education program, Ashley O'Neill. She's in our Master's in EdTech program and works as the program coordinator doing programs for K-12 students and teachers in the STEM Education Center. So we're very much looking forward to having Ashley be here next month. But for right now, we are going to be, of course, talking with Mike and finding out more about his views related to teaching and learning online. We've had lots of different conversations and lots of different contexts, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say tonight specifically about your research and how it can help us all become better teachers, whether we're in the K-12 world, the higher ed world, corporate training, whether we're online, whether we're face-to-face, whether we're some kind of hybrid model. Looking forward to all that. And of course, if anyone would like to participate in the chat room on the live stream page, I will be monitoring that chat. So feel free to jump in there. And also, we will be using the EdTech Currents hashtag on Twitter. So with all that in mind, welcome to our viewers that are on here, and welcome, Mike. You want to tell us just a little bit about kind of how you got here to this point at your educational career, maybe a little bit about life for you as a student, even in your doctoral program, and then also a little bit about how you decided to pursue a graduate degree and go into educational technology.
Okay, you can hear me okay just fine, Troy?
Yep, everything's great.
Okay. So yeah, my route to educational research, academia, educational technology is rather circuitous. Out of undergrad, I went to Kalamazoo College here in Michigan. I was an economics major, and I went to DC and did a little bit of staff economizing. I was a consultant, or I worked at a consulting place for about 3 years, and just did not find that particularly fulfilling. And then my wife, at the time, was looking for a doctoral program. She ended up going to Stony Brook, so I just went to Long Island with her, not knowing what I wanted to do with my life. And this was a time at which, in order to get a job in technology, all you needed to know was a little bit more about technology in one aspect of technology than the person that was interviewing you. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. There was a private school in Long Island that wanted somebody to do tech support. So I was like, well, I know how to fix spreadsheets, and I was kind of the tech guy in our econ office, so I took a job in technology at a school. with absolutely no background in education whatsoever. And literally was the guy running around fixing computers. About 6 weeks into that job, the person teaching computer science quit. And I don't know how many people watching this will have ever been in a private school, but if you have one class on your transcript from college in an area, you are qualified to teach that class if there's a shortage. And I had an introduction to computer science class on my transcript, and so I became the computer science teacher, which to this day I will say may be the hardest experience I've ever had in my life, because I had 5 kids in my first computer science class. I only had 1 computer science class in college. Those kids, 2 of them went on to MIT, 1 went to Brown, 1 went to Yale, and 1 went to Amherst. And I was studying 3 and 4 hours a night before their classes. So I got an appreciation for how hard education can be. I'll try to make this a shorter story. Basically, at that point, the director of education said, if you ever want to be truly in education, you need to get a degree. I went into Teachers College in the city, got a degree in computing and education. Then we moved back to Michigan. I took a job in a public school here for a year, and just really at that point, started to think that I was more interested in the bigger ideas about EdTech than I was the wires and the networking, which is, regardless of what your position was in EdTech at that point, in theory, half of my job was supposed to be about helping integrate technology in the classrooms, and I would say maybe 30 to 40% of it was, and I found that fulfilling, but the vast majority of it at that time was just putting out fires and making sure the network worked and all that kind of stuff. So, and this is not the best way to go get a PhD, I promise you. I called Michigan State and I said, well, I'd be really interested in taking a cognition and technology class. And they basically said, no, you can't take a class. You have to be a fully matriculated student. I was like, that doesn't sound so bad. So 4 months later, I'm a grad student in the doc program at Michigan State. And it was a great decision. Maybe not the best way to do it, but I loved it. I loved the program. I loved all the big discussions, the research. You know, that was kind of my stepping stone to getting into Central, and again, this is my 5th year at Central now, fully enjoying everything that brings you know, to bear in academic life, the classes, the research, and we'll talk obviously more about the research here in a few minutes. But yeah, it's been a good path, and I'm excited to see what comes. The field of educational technology, you know, changes as fast as any other field at this point, not only from a technological perspective, but you know, from a political perspective at times. I mean, it's just constantly changing, some of which is a little frustrating, but the rest of which is interesting and challenging, and, you know, promises to be all that and everything for the next 30 years, I suspect. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we could spend the whole hour just talking about like the state of e-learning and about doctoral study and things like that. But if you had to take just a minute or two to kind of sum up your kind of current thinking about what it means for you to be an online instructor in the work that you do, especially with graduate students.
Yeah.
What kind of words of we'll ask for the words of wisdom early rather than saving them till the end of the show. What would you say about working with students online?
You know, I've been teaching in master's programs online for, I can't even say 10, 12 years now, because when I was at Michigan State, that was basically all my TA assignments for online. So I have always found teaching the master's level online to be very, I wouldn't say easy, but the transition wasn't as bumpy as even, so I've taught a few undergrad classes, and now we've got our new doctoral program. I think the master's level is the perfect level to teach online, at least in EdTech. The motivation of the students, the experience of the students, the openness of the students seems to all match with that really well. And the types of projects you do match with the online environment really well too, and increasingly so because of the availability of a variety of technologies. Undergrad, I've had some, you know, I mean, there's lots and lots of research about what it takes to be a successful undergrad online learner. I'm not sure that every student in the United States fits that. I'm quite certain all of them do. I'm not sure it's a very large percentage as 18 and 19-year-olds that are ready to have the self-regulation and the motivation to really be successful in online class in undergrad. But I've only done that a couple times, so I'm not sure the state of that. The doctoral program is really interesting. I think our first 2 years have been very successful. I think if you asked our first cohort, though, we've changed paths quite a few times on them, and I hope that they're still comfortable with that. They seem to be every time I talk to them about it. But we are literally building, you know, the plane as we fly it. There is, at Central Michigan University, I just realized this as I was thinking about it. If you go to the website, if you go to the old Global Campus website, it says we have 3 online doctoral degrees. But the reality is the doctorate in health administration has a face-to-face component, and the ed leadership has a face-to-face component. And doctoral programs, maybe a little bit more than master's programs, really rely on community. And when you can meet with somebody for just even one day, face-to-face, you have such a head start on that community versus trying to start that from scratch online. And I think we're doing a better job, but it's hard to do. And I think some of the things, the way I teach a master's class is very different than the way I teach a doctoral class. I still maybe am a little bit old school in that I think the doctorate is about reading, writing, and thinking, and you can have a 3-hour online video conference if you want to, but that gets stale faster than sitting around a Harkness table in Erickson Hall at Michigan State University. And I've tried a lot of things and worked and researched, and I don't know that there's an answer to that right yet. And the answer probably is the 3-hour online, is not the way to go, and you've got to make adaptations. But being maybe a little bit old school, I still want to try and maximize the extent to which the benefits of the doctoral experience derive from those three things, and still explore different tools that will allow us to do that, or different processes or different approaches to teaching, things like that. So said, I was undergraduate, master's, and doctoral, and you can go ahead and throw in K-12 right there. In terms of a state of the industry, I would say that where we're going to be, if where we're going to be is a 10, as an industry, we're still only at a 3 or 4. There are still massive refinements, massive evolution, massive technologies to be released to make all these things better. And I think one of the things that's going to make them better is when we finally, as a group, step away from this idea of trying, and I kind of just said this about trying to make the online experience like the face-to-face used to be. I think that's the thing that it's even getting in my way right now to a certain extent. But I'm aware that it's getting in my way. I think a lot of faculty members don't know it's in their way because it's just their default position. I just want to I want to get done online what I did face-to-face because it was so successful for so long. And that's slowing down this progress that we could be making and really, creating that much more of a useful, effective, enhancing, and fulfilling experience online. But yeah, I think it's just going to take time. And this is, again, we could go. Part of this is related to politics and just the way that universities and K-12 institutions work, and we got to get around all that stuff. But I think we're moving in the right direction. I think we're doing something. So I'm the director of the doctoral program, so I'm going to talk about that a lot. Troy's the director of the master's program. I think we're doing something really interesting with the doctoral program right now. Ours is, the focus of it is different than PhDs and EDDs, and that means the activities can be a little bit different, and that means even me, I may have to adjust my expectations. So maybe I'm still thinking, well, this is what my PhD at Michigan State was like. It doesn't have to be just like that in the DET, and I'm still learning from the students and learning from the types of students that we get and the types of activities that are successful and the types of research that emanates from the work that we do in the classroom. And that just all takes some time. But it is, I will say, teaching in the doctoral program in particular and the master's program to a certain extent makes me as excited about teaching, not teaching online or teaching face-to-face, as excited about teaching as I've been in a very, very long time, just because there's every time we do it, it's just a little bit different and a little bit better. And you're like, okay, it's like, I know I just made a mistake. I know this week stunk. I know next time it's going to be better because I can do this, 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 and this. Yeah. A new way of doing it that we can try. So I think the state of the industry is good. We still have a long ways to go though. And that it will require some new ways of thinking, and I'm just happy to be part of it. And I know there's an awful lot of people doing an awful lot of good thinking about it as well. So.
Yeah, well, I have to agree. I mean, I think that we've gotten to this point where, at least here in our conversations about online, I'm as excited having the conversations about online teaching and learning. And like you were just saying, oops, I did this week. I'll try to do better next week or the next time I teach this class. And that level of reflection and analysis, it's really intellectually stimulating. And I hope that it keeps working that way. So
all that said, I will say that there are definitely times that I just miss face-to-face classes though.
Yeah.
Really, I every once in a while I feel like it would just be nice to be in a classroom, hour and a half at a time, 3 hours at a time, whatever it is. So I don't want us to throw out the baby with the bathwater in the industry. There's huge value to that in certain circumstances, and some of it might just be, spiritual. Like,
oh, right, yeah.
And talking about big ideas or doing projects together is it's another way of accomplishing similar tasks, or moving along the path towards the end goals of a program. And we've even talked about so we have a fully online degree, and we would never want to, as part of that fully online degree, require face-to-face, meetings. But it doesn't mean that we can't send out to all of the doctoral students or all the master's students, we're going to be at McCall, let's rent out a room and have a half a credit class, or we're going to be at the National Site Conference. If you can make it there with the DET, we're going to run, a separate elective that's part of the conference. Those are the things that there's lots of flexibility built into the online program. Just because it's online doesn't mean we can't kind of do some of that stuff. And you and I have talked about a little bit of that, in terms of some summer experiences and things like that. So I for some reason, the last few days I've been thinking, man, it's been a long time since I was in front of students in a classroom.
Yeah.
I miss that.
Yeah. Well, and I know you've already addressed some of this, but we have one of our colleagues from the program here who is in one of our cohorts that just asked, this is Preston, said, what do you see differently and what makes it better or different from or unique from traditional programs? I think you've already answered that to some extent, but is there anything you'd want to wrap up saying before you jump in to talk a bit about your research?
I'm assuming Preston is talking about the DET, and I think just philosophically, what we're doing, I think, is something that is not currently available with all the other degrees, and I think we are doing everything we can to focus the work to the students and through the research projects to be something that furthers their career. It is practitioner and practically oriented, and I know EDD programs said that that's what they were going to be. But I think what we found when we looked at the market and tried to determine where we wanted to position this degree is that the EDDs got a little bit of like academic rigor with the PhDs, right? They wanted to be that theoretical program. They wanted to be considered like that, and that left the practitioner piece a little bit short. And that's what we want to focus on, is just that piece alone. But I also feel like it's beyond just the mission of the program. I think we are, in our courses, finding a middle way between, and again, I'm saying thinking and reading and writing, I'm backing off on that, and finding the middle way between the project-oriented master's and the fully featured theoretical PhD. We're looking for that. And as Preston is, one of our cohort 1 students, so for instance, one of the things that I'm doing I'm designing the final course that those cohort 1 people are going to take, and I've got some goals for that course. I sent out an email to all the students that I had semester 1 a year and a half ago who are all working through the second year, and I said, listen, I want to meet with you, and I want you to help me design this course experience, because I know what I want to get done, but you guys are almost third-year doctoral students. You've been through this. We're building this plane together. Let's create a class for this new literacies and creativity class, interesting, because I'm going to talk about that stuff, that fulfills your needs and fulfills my goals and gets you ready for a dissertation. Because I think what we're really focusing on, and Troy knows this, when we get together as the DET faculty, what we're trying to avoid is what Whitehead used to talk about, was this inert knowledge, inert activities for the sake of the activity. And when we have our doctoral students do next summer they're going to do a comprehensive exam. When I took a comprehensive exam, it took me 3 days and I never looked at it again. We are actively trying to design a comprehensive exam experience that naturally segues directly into the doctoral program. And we may, Preston, you're listening, we may not hit it out of the park the first time, and he knows that. But I know that Preston is willing to help us find that, because I think he believes in that philosophy too. And all the students, if they didn't believe in it when they got here, are buying into it more and more and more. And we don't want our students doing things that don't benefit them either intellectually or professionally later on. And then again, I know I did that in my class every once in a while. I'm sure Troy has done that. But our goal is to move away from that as much as we can. And I can, again, I'm not trying to disparage the MSU program at all. I loved it. It is a fantastic PhD program. And if that's what you want to do, I'll write you a recommendation to go there. We're trying to do something different. And necessarily want to do that because it's a completely different goal. You know, the PhD at that level at a Research One university, their primary goal is to create faculty members to go to other universities, and they do it really, really well. I mean, I'm here, Troy's here. They do it really, really well. We're trying to find that niche, and we're still working on it, but I think we're doing a pretty good job there.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Fantastic.
All
Latha
right.
says she's coming for.
Yep.
So
Give her some frequent flyer miles. Get her over here next summer, or this summer if we get this whole thing pulled together. We'll see how it goes. So, well, great. Well, for those of you who may not be familiar with Mike's work, he is interested in this intersection of teaching and play and creativity, and thinking about how educators can use the web in a number of different ways. I'm going to put a link to his co-authored and edited book called Reading at the Crossroads, and highly recommend the book, not just because it's from Mike, but because it is a very good book, and anyone in our program, as well as anyone interested in new literacies and technologies, online reading comprehension, anything along those lines, it's a veritable who's who of reading rock stars in the book, and it's I think useful even for folks who are in K-12. It's a little theoretical, but there are still lots of ideas that you could take and translate into your own practice, and certainly something that anyone studying literacy practices now should be looking at. Mike's also given me a list of lots of different articles that I'll try to pop into the chat room as well. And for about the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to turn off my camera and let Mike take the show. He is going to tell a little bit more about his research and his work. If you have slides or anything you'd like to share, feel free to do that, Mike. But I will periodically chime in if questions are coming in on YouTube page or Twitter. But go ahead, Mike, and take it away.
Okay, sounds good. So first, I just want to make a comment about that book. There's three other grad students and myself and a doctoral advisor at Michigan State put that book together, and it is a little bit theoretical at parts, but if you find a chapter in there that you really like the ideas, most of the people that wrote in that book do a lot of work in K-12 or in university settings, and they'll have other work that isn't at that level, and then you can explore some of the more applicable things that they are working with beyond those chapters. So, you know, like I said, if you like what they're saying, just look them up, Google them, and you'll find a lot of other work that they do that might help you with your decision making in the classroom even more. So, as those of you that have had me in class know, my biggest problem with this kind of online webinar video, I don't have any idea where to look, and I've got a huge screen up here, and I've got a small screen down here, so please don't follow my eyes as much as, you know, just listen to what I'm saying. That said, I think those of you that know me know that I can wax on forever, find multiple tangents and digressions, and almost always build in a story about my kids. I'll laugh at my own jokes sometimes, and so somebody might have to like cut me off if I go too far down one of those transgressions. I guess that's your job, Troy. So it's interesting that we talked about my path to academia, because it made me remember what I think is the seed to all of my research right now. So I was working as a K-12 technology director, technology integrator on Long Island, and we would do school visits at that time because it was just the Wild West of educational technology. We always wanted to see what other schools were doing. And there was a school out on the east end of Long Island called the Ross School. It wasn't really public, it wasn't really private. They called it a laboratory school because it was fully funded by the Ross family, who are the ones who contribute to Michigan Business School all the time right now. It was just an amazing place. And this was before wireless technology, wires all over the place, but they were all, you could see where they were going because they wanted people to just understand the concept of technology really well. That was mixed with an Eastern philosophy, so the school wasn't focused on technology for technology's sake, which is the phrase that you'll hear about bad implementations of technology, and that was all over the place in the 90s. They were really looking for new ways of thinking and learning with technology. So I'm walking around in this place, and oh, this is great. I'd love to work here, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And then they take us into this room, and it's an 8-sided octagonal room with benches all the way around the bottom. And this is, I don't know how many of you remember, they were gray Toshibas. I don't remember the model. They weighed like 17 pounds, had little 14-inch screens, and they had a bunch of those. That was what they had for people to walk around with. But they had to plug in everywhere. So you sit down, and you plug in, and you've got your laptop, it's on your lap, and it was designed to have discussion. But what it was is you would not only plugging in your Ethernet, which gave you access to the web, and they assumed that the web was going to be part of your conversation. It became a cognitive partner at that point. So you're talking and you're looking stuff up, and you're talking and you're looking more stuff up, and you're providing evidence from the web in the conversation. And in addition to that, there was a screen above your head too, which you could share your ideas not only verbally but visually. And I was blown away by this because it really was the first situation where I saw the potential for this technology to change not only communication patterns, but literally the way that we think, because there's this external cognitive prosthesis that we're accessing and using to demonstrate ideas. So that was before I ever had any consideration of going to graduate school and becoming a professor. But I was just like, from then on, even as a technology director, and I think maybe this was to my detriment as a technology director, I was always looking for this way for the technology to be a cognitive partner, rather than how to use a smartboard effectively in the classroom, how to use this tool effectively in the classroom, or how to use spreadsheets to do financial analysis. And maybe that's why I had to leave, because those things started to kind of bother me, because I really wanted to get at this big stuff. And that's why the doctoral program and being in a professorial position, I think, worked so well for me. So fast forward, that was probably late 90s. Fast forward to my first year as a doctoral student. And again, still kind of trying to figure out this cognitive partnership thing, whatever, but not having any of the jargon or any of the ideas, not really knowing where I'm going at all. It's my first semester. I'll ask you when you're a doctoral student is, what is your research topic? Which, of course, as a director of technology, I needed to know this much about this wide, and then I'm in a doctoral program and they want me to know something like this narrow about this deep 6 weeks in. And I have no idea what to say to anybody. And I specifically remember running, for those of you that have ever been on Grand Rapids, running down Cascade Road, just north of 28th Street. This was before my hips went bad, so I'm running all the time. And it was a way to clear my mind, but every once in a while I just have an idea. And I remember looking up at a billboard. I still have no idea what the billboard said. And in my mind, I was like, well, I wonder if Google, like when we Google something, if it helps us be more creative or if it actually stifles our creativity. And my perspective at that time was, so let's pick a topic, bullying in middle school. So you want to try and solve this problem, and everybody Googles, how to lessen bullying in middle school. And everybody Googles it. And everybody that Googles it gets the same 10 results on the front page. And really what research shows is that hardly anybody, especially at that time, but even maybe to continue into the present time, rarely go past the first 10 results, right? You look at a couple of them and you get some ideas and you move on and you write a paper or something like that. And it just stuck with me. And so I started to think about this idea of creativity and technology in general, but the notion of Google and technology and Google and creativity, it was the one that, through the first several classes of my doctoral program, it just interested me so much. So, for those of you that are in a doctoral program, you take your classes and then you get into this practicum or this independent inquiry type of project. So my first research project in grad school was based around this idea. It was derivative of that run that I had on 28th Street or on Cascade Road. And what I did is I just took a bunch of pre-service teachers who were interested in math. And I gave them a couple different possibilities. Like, I wanted them to try to come up with some new and creative ways to teach the Pythagorean theorem and probability, both of which, in middle school, some kids have trouble with. And in one condition, they got to sit in front of a computer and use Google, and were encouraged to use Google. And in the other situation, I just got a stack of books about math and about textbooks from middle school and all kinds of, literally 20 books that they could just go through to try and help. This was a creative activity, so there was no answer. And I just wanted to see what would happen. And I was not surprised that in the end, from a research perspective, I had them write something up and then had experts look at the creativity in those things that they wrote up based on a creative product semantic scale, which, if anybody's interested, I can share with you. And in the end, there was no statistical difference between the two groups based on the balancing and all that kind of stuff that we did. I wasn't surprised by that necessarily. I think what I was blown away at with that was how they used the web. Because I was sitting there observing and watching and keeping data and collecting all this stuff and looking at it afterwards. And in I don't remember what the exact numbers are, but all across the candidates, all across the participants, there were like 10 hours of web searching on the Pythagorean theorem and probability. And I think there were only 13 unique keyword search phrases across all the participants in those 8 hours of studying. And all of the keyword search phrases were in the domain of mathematics. You know, so if you study and learn about research, learn about creativity at all, a lot of creative ideas come by crossing domains, right? You take an idea from somewhere else, you mix it with an idea from your domain, and then you can get something new that might work in your domain. And so, you know, all of a sudden this really, you know, as much as that I feel like I got some answers there, it made me even more confused, because it was like, well, you know, so in order to maybe take advantage of the creative potential of the web, you have to come up with what is essentially a list of creative passwords, right? So you've got to be creative in order to take advantage of the creativity of the web. And then it just became this circular, well, sometimes the web or a technology can facilitate creativity, but sometimes it requires it because it needs to be repurposed for a task that it wasn't originally designed for. You know, so Google wasn't designed to facilitate creativity. We wanted to facilitate creativity, but we might need to be a little bit creative in order to do that. So that's where I'm stuck. You know, I have no idea what to do with this. So after doing a lot more reading, a lot more writing, a lot of you know, discussions with my advisors, I was able to put together a dissertation that I think gave me some more ideas about what's happening here. And essentially what I did with this dissertation is two things. I looked at kind of the way that education, K-12 in particular, but maybe all the way through the university, views creativity and some of the things that are associated with it. And what I found is that there were a couple things that were kind of troubling. First of all, if you look at Bloom's taxonomy, which is used well in some cases, not well in too many cases, there was kind of some, you know, there was a treatment at the top of Bloom's taxonomy of the process of creativity, but most of the action words that were associated with it were under the umbrella of synthesis, and most of them meant to just kind of bring some things together rather than be generative. And so before I even embarked on collecting data or anything like this, in my literature review, I proposed what would be a proto-theory that differentiated what synthesis should be considered. So parts of synthesis are just about gathering information, bringing them together so that you understand what was intended in the documents that they're looking at across multiple documents or across ideas. That I proposed as synthesis for meaning. But then again, all deriving from Bloom's taxonomy idea of synthesis, I thought that there needed to be something else to really specifically say you can synthesize generatively, which is essentially creativity. But I didn't want to just throw creativity into the mix, even though later on, of course, Bloom's taxonomy just added creativity at the top and changed some of this, but then they kind of threw out synthesis. And I think they're both important. You have to be able to use higher order thinking to synthesize meaning across multiple sources and through multiple lenses, but then you've got to also be able to take that and then generatively synthesize something new. I mean, if you go look at definitions of synthesis in the dictionary, it was almost always about something new coming out of a system versus just mixing them. So anyway, I propose that. That's part of the research process is re-operationalizing and being very succinct about how you define things. And then what I wanted to do is just find out what advanced learners would do even on the web. So these weren't people who were advanced web users. They were just really smart people. And I put them on the web. They were all doctoral or law or business students or whatever at Michigan State. And I gave them tasks that they probably didn't know very much about. And I kind of tested those before doing the study to see if, you know, people know things, don't know very much about them. And they were about, at the time, this was, let's see, climate change was one of them, which is so open-ended that it's great. Nobody can know everything about it. And then single-payer healthcare institutions, which a lot of people think they know, but once you start searching about it, you realize there's a whole universe of ideas out there that most of us don't. And the other thing about these, when I chose them for my research, is that they were things that when you Googled them, there wasn't an easy answer on the front page. There was no Wikipedia entry that could just give you an answer. These were wide open, you know, ill-structured tasks for which creative solutions are needed. And so in walking through and observing and guiding tasks with these advanced adult learners, what I was able to start seeing was several themes that came out across the work that they did. And then those themes were that they used divergent search phrases. So my first group of undergrads didn't, and these people did. Now, to this day, I can't answer why, and that's a whole research line right there, is to try and figure out why some people will use divergent search word phrases and why some won't. But it doesn't mean that we can't try to facilitate that with people for certain types of tasks, which I'll come back to. They did a lot of this synthesis for meaning. They would look at 6 or 7 articles, paraphrase all of them, but with a universal understanding, not paraphrasing this paragraph, paraphrasing this paragraph, but bringing the meaning implied and direct across and maybe putting it in their notes. They made what I would call like little in-the-moment insights. They were creative insights that didn't necessarily in and of themselves solve the problem, but they were insights that were necessary as pieces of the solution that they would later generate. They repurposed a lot of information, and this is something that is emerging as students are constantly taking one thing and remixing it, and mashing it up. And at the time, this was something that was really, really powerful and very prevalent in the work that, for the successful solutions that were promoted in the research, was something that they did a lot of. And then the other thing that happened is that ideas that they had that were developing were constantly reinforced in some way. And it wasn't just that they saw the same idea in a different source and they're like, oh, they think that too. It was that they would often see something like, they'd see an idea in a really hard sort of high-level resource that was very complex as presented, and then later they would see it more simplistically, and it would help them not only understand it, but make insights about it. So as I'm talking about all these, one might lead to another. So a reinforcement of that idea might immediately lead to an in-the-moment insight about it. And then the other thing, again, this sounds so kind of funny in retrospect, but the one thing that became so important is that they were using notes in different ways. And I wouldn't, different maybe isn't the right word. So many people hop on the web and they just stop taking notes. Whereas if they were in a traditional offline resource, they would. And the importance of note-taking and the various types of notes that are available between the digital notes and the offline notes and stuff became something that was very apparent and very important. Some other things that came out of this study were, at the time, and I think continues to this day, especially in K-12, but I've even got some examples of university rubrics for libraries. There are certain rules and heuristics about what you can use on the web and what you can't. And of course, the top 2 are don't use Wikipedia, don't use any what I would call soft resources. So don't use blogs, certainly don't use comments on the New York Times articles. Well, for a creative task, you're just looking for ideas, and you want ideas to bounce around inside your head so that you can have an insight. And I can tell you that some of the best ideas in the research that I've looked at when I work with these people came from non-traditional, what would be considered soft resources. And so this is where it becomes really important for us to if there's one thing that I would like you to take away from this talk, because there's lots going on here, is that all of the technology tools that we look at, whether it's the web or whether it's a spreadsheet, I think we need to know try to differentiate between a learning task and a creative task. One where you're gathering and synthesizing information and maybe giving it back, or when you're really trying to come up with something that is new. And there are so many different ways to define creativity. But I will say, if it's new to you, it's creative, right? Like you are generating new knowledge for yourself. Now we can talk about whether that moves beyond the domain or moves beyond the classroom or anything like that. That's a whole nother talk and requires interaction. Like that's not what I want to talk about myself. But it was clear to me that we need to start thinking about what is the task and how do we support that task in technology-mediated environments. And this isn't just about the web anymore. Everything is technology-mediated now, right? We're always going to have something on our wrist. We're always going to have something in our hand. We're always going to have something in front of our face, whether you're in a K-12 school, whether you're in college, or whether you're working for IBM and you're in a conference room. You're going to have this device. And as you're using it, you need to decide not just the specific task, but what kind of information do you want to produce, or what kind of information do you want to ingest? Because sometimes you do just need to ingest information and understand it. But sometimes, and more, we need to be thinking about the creative element here. So I think what I'm going to do right now is a planned digression before I move forward. And this planned digression is a little bit about, well, why creativity? Just because I was running down Cascade Road and had a really cool insight, why have I spent the last 10 years of my life thinking about creativity? Well, in terms of education, I think if you look back, researchers especially, but policymakers, we've always been interested in higher order thinking and creativity, right? That's the goal of all education, is to have people who can do the higher order things. But you see it in the research, it's a refrain, but it's often an empty refrain because there's just always been too much to do in schools, right? So for a very, very long time, creativity was left to the arts classes, the music classes, and the creative writing courses. Now fast forward 40 years from that, all of a sudden we've got this device in our hands that maybe makes it a little bit less important to memorize stuff all the time. And maybe that means we have a little bit more time to do this higher order stuff. So we've always wanted to focus on creativity in the classroom, but we didn't necessarily feel like we had the time. Now maybe there's just an inkling that we will have that time. Now I know any of you are K-12 teachers or work with K-12 teachers saying, you know what, that time was replaced long ago by tests. And the reality is we still have to have kids memorize all this stuff. And I get all that. A lot of what I'm talking about is idealistic to a certain extent, but that's one of the reasons I love academia, is it allows you to think idealistically sometimes, but it also allows you to think into the future. And I think at some point we're going to recognize that having kids fill out worksheets and regurgitate information is completely meaningless because they've got all these devices on their wrists. And unless it's fostering a certain type of thinking, we shouldn't be doing it anymore. And at the same time, I think what was happening, so this is now we're talking late 90s, early 2000s, there was a huge cultural awakening about the importance of creativity, and it's partly because we could put a dollar sign on it now, right? If there was no innovation, if there was no creative thinking, if there was no good design, Apple wouldn't exist. And Apple is worth more than almost every company on the planet right now. And this is the time where authors like Richard Florida would write articles about the creative class or write books about the creative class and how it's going to be the economic engine of the future, right? So in that book, Richard Florida's book, he talks about how the new MBA, everybody wanted to make money in the 80s, went and got an MBA, and even into the 90s. In his book, he says, you know what, the new MBA is the MFA, the Masters in Fine Arts, because Fortune 500 companies are going into places like the Rhode Island School of Design and hiring the MFAs because they can think in a different way than the MBA people can. And you know what that did? Just here, okay, here's one of my tangents. It completely changed the applicant pool to the Rhode Island School of Design, by the way. All the people in high school decided they wanted to make a lot of money. Instead of charting a path, not all of them, some of them, charting a path to an MBA, we're now trying to get into different undergraduate programs that might help them get into RISD, which is, I think, just an interesting aside. So one final bit to why creativity. And this starts to sound a little bit science fiction-y. But just last week, I read an article. It was an interview with Elon Musk. Tesla, Elon Musk, who's got his Hyperloop and he's got batteries and gigafactories and all this kind of stuff. He seems to know what he's talking about and monetizing it and not just being crazy. He said by 2030, right? So what is it? So 13 years, not 2080, not 3000. By 2030, he predicts that 50% of the jobs in the United States will be replaced by robots, algorithms, and the like. Now, whether that happens in 2030 or 2040 or 2050. We'd have to be hiding under a rock to not see that that's what's happening, right? There's lots of automation. Algorithms are increasingly sophisticated, and robots are doing surgery and building cars and eventually maybe building their own robots. So what is the one thing that robots and algorithms and computers can't do, though? One of the things, they can't think creatively. Now, there's other things they can't do. They can't have passion. They can't have empathy. So for those of you that have kids that are in 7th and 9th grade like me and you're thinking about what careers they want to have, I'm really happy. I've got one who loves math and science, and she might end up programming robots or building robots but I've got another one who I think has lots of empathy and lots of passion, and I'm trying to think, okay, there's certain fields that I don't think will ever be replaced by technology, one being like, psychology. Maybe be a great, and again, I'm digressing here into my children. I told you there'd be a story about my children, that's my one. The bottom line being, what's distinctly human about us is what's going to allow us to A, have jobs, and B, have fulfillment in the future. And creativity is one of those. It's not the only one, but it's one of the reasons that I have such a passion for it, because I think increasingly it will become important in the workplace, which means eventually it will become more important in schools. And this combination of us not having to remember as much anymore and needing creative, abilities just to get a job, drive my research. Okay, one more digression. I have no idea where we're at for time right now. But one thing that I think is very useful walking into any institution to talk about creativity. And I think it is differentiating the term, and maybe this is just me, but I've seen it in several articles and other places, term creativity from creative thinking. And I don't know if I think Ty was supposed to come. Ty is a student that I had over in Europe with Michigan State, and she probably heard this story before. But I grew up thinking I was not a creative person. And I'd never even thought I might have some creative abilities until I got into my doctoral program. And it was because what I started to interpret about myself is that I could be a creative thinker. It didn't mean that I had to be aesthetically gifted in an art class. And I'll go back to the story I probably told Ty in Europe. I got a D on my Applehead doll in 3rd grade art. I've always been challenged aesthetically. I'm colorblind, I can't draw, I have some musical talent, but it's more algorithmic rather than truly, having the soul to play the piano. I play the words, the letters, or the notes that are on the pages. I don't, anyway. But I think I've had a lot of success thinking creatively. So you can think creatively in science and not necessarily be able to draw. You can think creatively in the social sciences, in history, and not necessarily be able to play a musical instruments. And I think one of the things that bothers me about the creativity books and literature that are out there sometimes is they sometimes too often push this idea that if you want to be a creative scientist, you have to be a polymath. And this is the book that we use, Ty, right? Sparks of Genius by Ruth Bernstein, basically saying, you got to be an artist and a scientist if you want to be a creative scientist. I'm not sure I buy into that as much anymore, except that in order to be a creative scientist, you need to foster a level of mindfulness that allows you to see beyond what other scientists might see, which doesn't mean you need to be an artist, but it probably does mean in your regular life you need to take a step away from the iPod and the iPad and the computer every once in a while in order to just have the balance in your brain to see that. That's, again, another whole argument. That's a discussion for another time, and that one might require some additional contributions so that we can all think very creatively about that topic. So think about if you're approaching other teachers or even in your own writings about research, is it creativity or is it creative thinking, and is it useful to differentiate the two? And I just want to add one more thing, Troy. I know you're gonna throw me off here. So a lot of what I've just talked about is all me, right? That's me. That's my opinions. That's my research. One thing I want to point out to you that I think would be really useful for people that are even remotely interested in this. I think my papers, if you're specifically interested in the kind of stuff that I've talked about, great, go read my papers. If you're remotely interested in technology and education and creativity, there's a deep play research group at Michigan State that has published about 25 articles in tech trends. And you can just Google deep play Michigan State and get to their website and click on a link, and all their papers are there. And what that does is there's several articles in there that break down different elements of creativity, like pattern recognition or the ability to observe. And they talk about why that component is important, how you can integrate it into schools, and often specific pieces of hardware or software that will facilitate those. And for those of you that know TPAC, it's a very TPAC perspective because Punya is part of the research group. And what they're trying to do is match the needs of the creative thinking elements to the affordances of the technologies that are out there. And you can see that emerge in all these papers that they've written. I've got a couple in there, just, I'm not trying to pump myself up, but it's a really good place for you to start if you're more generally interested in this topic versus the specific stuff that I was talking about. Now, if you're specifically interested in the stuff I'm talking about, I think you should apply for our DET program, and I will do research with you, and we'll have a blast. And we can do this like every night on video conferences. And that'll be my last thing because I know I'm over time and talked about my kids for too long. So.
Not a problem at all. I was trying to fire off tweets about some of the things that you were saying, and hopefully some of it's got out there. So yeah, you've got one comment here from Joy. It says, fostering creativity is good for humanity. Absolutely. And you do have at least one question here. Says, which apps, websites, or tools do you use to foster this kind of creative thinking? I think is where that's coming from. And everyone else, please feel free to throw questions in the chat on the YouTube page or using the hashtag EdTech current with an S on the end. And we've got a few minutes here for Mike to take some questions. So let's start with that one, Mike. What are the apps, websites, and tools that are like number 1, 2, and 3 on your list right now for helping you be more creative as a teacher and a learner on the web?
Well, yeah, that's a hard one for me to answer, because I really just focus on how you use the web for creative purposes. So my app would be, the Google app on my phone. It's how you use it. And so I don't know a lot of other apps that are out there, but what I would say is that there's some other articles that we could talk about too that identify different ways that software and hardware can support creativity. And some of them are they just break down the creative process and try to scaffold that for you. So I'm sure that there are apps that are out there that's, for instance, break down the fact that you need to orient yourself with the problem, and then you need to find out more about it. And then you actually need to incubate a little bit, and then you need to synthesize. I'm a little bit dubious about that, but I think it works for some people. And even in the classes that I teach, I have broken down 12 different skills that I think can help you be more creative using the web, and I introduce them one at a time. They all have to be used in concert eventually for them to be successful, but it doesn't mean that you can't find an app that says, okay, today your job is to just really define your problem, and then tomorrow your job is going to be to learn as much as you can about it. And then the next day you're going to specifically just, take some time, think about it, take some time off, come back and see if you have an insight. Like, there's a lot of debate about whether creativity can actually be fostered or not, right? And so that's one possible app that could be out there. So there was one of the articles I was reading and preparing for this, the author said, computers can also be just used as a nanny to support creativity. And basically what they were saying is there's so much low-hanging fruit in all of our lives, just in terms of organization, that if we can use computers to free up all the cognitive energy we're wasting on checking our email and taking care of our calendars and all that kind of stuff, that leads to, because all the creativity literature says you've got to be able to free your mind at some point, to let it just incubate. Now, if you need a scheduler, if you need a nanny, if you need an admin assistant in your software to help make the time to do that, I think that's another, and that sounds kind of boring, but that is something that can lead you to have the 40 minutes at night to go for a walk, and during that walk, look up and see a tree and have an insight about something that's happening in your classroom. And I don't, again, that's not really my area, but I don't want to de-emphasize that. When I was writing up some notes about how to finish this article or this webinar, I think creativity can be fostered by technology. I think more of me is now thinking that culturally, the impact of technology, and I know Preston's going to love this, is squelching our opportunities to be creative, because we never stop with our phones. We never stop with our iPads. We never stop with our computers. And there may be a different kind of creativity that comes out by being just immersed in knowledge, but you're hard-pressed to find anybody that writes about creativity, that does creativity research, that doesn't emphasize this need to just free up the brain every once in a while. And that doesn't mean you need to go meditate, but it does mean that you can't be sitting on your phone all the time. And just related to this, I was going to read some passages from a book that I've just now started, but I won't. But I want to give everybody the title to it, because again, if you're interested in this kind of thing, and the emphasis on how they define creativity in this book and how they define what they call the digital age is really important. And what I want people, what this book does is it's looking at a cultural perspective on technology and a cultural perspective on the digital age. And that cultural perspective is really important to consider in classrooms. And I think the interesting thing about this book is it's written by a woman named Avril Lovelace, and it's only out in 2013. And it's a very ecological, cultural, evolutionary look. It's very holistic at what, if you go back 10 years, if you go back to 11 years to 2002, she wrote this fantastic paper for England, for their national policymakers. It was basically a literature review on technology and creativity. And in it, it's like a complete opposite perspective on it like reduces technology down to its 6 affordances, and it reduces creative thinking down to its 7 needs, and it tries to match them up And it's a great place to start, but with something like creativity that is so difficult to put your finger on, it's the evolution from that kind of overly reductive to this wide I think we all need to, even as teachers, think about how, so we can use technology maybe in a class to foster creativity in this way, but if you need to be creative as a person in order to fully take advantage of that thing we're happening in the classroom, then we need to talk to our kids about, and are you on your phone all the time, and does your brain have time to take a break so that when we're doing this activity in fourth hour, you might be able to have an insight. And again, these are topics that are worthy of an entire career research, and an entire career of trial and error in a classroom, doing things that you think might foster creativity. And then, even if you're in a classroom trying to foster creativity, the big question with creativity research, which I still get, is how do you measure it? There's all kinds of ways to measure, from Torrance tests to experts. It's one of the more difficult things to measure out there, but it doesn't mean we stop trying, right? And it doesn't mean that there aren't multiple ways. And if those of you that are in the DET program, we can't triangulate our instruments to try and get different information from a survey than we have from an expert and see if that all uncovers something about it. So that was a long answer, but I didn't have an answer to it, so I just threw in a bunch of other stuff. But
yep, it's perfect. No, I agree. There are lots of books that are out there right now that try to strike this balance between the use of technology and also allowing us, I know the catchphrase right now is mindfulness, and we could talk about the positives and negatives related to that phrase, but I know that's out there, and it'd be great to see that resource.
Before I forget, I don't think I ever did give the title to the book. Learning Identities in a Digital Age.
Okay.
Rethinking Creativity, Education, and Technology. So I know that's a lot, but if you just kind of go Google all that stuff, Learning Identities in a Digital Age, Rethinking Creativity. Loveless is the author, the book that she wrote in 2013. It's not long, it's like 180 pages. Again, if you're interested in the broader implications of all this, it's a fantastic read. It's not overly, academic. It's just interesting stuff.
Yeah, great. Well, there's some more chat conversation from some of our colleagues here related to this question of, creativity connecting to technology, and I think you've addressed some of that. And so I just want to acknowledge Tammy, Melissa, Preston. Thanks for adding those ideas in there. And I too, I think that, we have to think about the ways in which we invite students to use technology in creative ways. And when, this reminds me of Julie Coiro's work around personalized versus personalization, and thinking about what the technologies are and when we use them and how we employ them and so forth. So I'm going to take you in a slightly different direction here, because I know we're getting close on time, and maybe you have some thoughts on this. I know that we've seen many different models of Bloom's revised taxonomy for the 21st century, some of which may have specific apps attached to them, which I can almost guess what you might say about that, but I'll be curious to hear. And then some of them are just thinking about how we might upend the model, and where most, at the top, synthesis and evaluation used to be the little bit at the very top, but now you see the pyramids that are inverted, and it's the base, and it's supposed to be very big. For K-12 or higher ed folks who are familiar with Bloom's, what is your current thinking about that, and how Bloom's in the 21st century might work, and how it connects to creativity?
Well, I'll say the one thing so there was a restructured Bloom's where synthesis became creativity, and I think that was around 2001. And then somebody, I think it was the University of Illinois, actually took that and then redesigned it for the digital age. So they basically, I think, kept the same structure, but just added a variety. So Bloom's, you'll often see, has major categories, and then they have a bunch of action words associated with it. And I think all they did for the 21st century one was add a bunch of new action words that are technological ways to accomplish the broader categories. And I remember thinking, when I was looking at the 21st century one, I liked it because they put mashups in. I'm a huge fan of mashups, but I think, like with anything, I just think that there's so much more to learning than Bloom's taxonomy, whether it's the 21st century version or the old version. It's just one way to start thinking about this stuff. And if you come across a resource that says this app is going to foster insight, or this app is great for mashups. That's great. It doesn't mean you hand it to a student and they're going to do a meaningful mashup. Because I'll go back to what I was talking about earlier. The mashup instruments that are out there can do one of two things. It can take a bunch of information from a bunch of categories and just stitch them together, or it can help you take a bunch of information from a bunch of different categories, come up with a global understanding of them, which I would call synthesis for meaning, but it can also help you take a bunch of ideas from a bunch of different areas and come up with a new way of thinking about something. All three of those are possible with that same app using the exact same action word from the 21st century. A mashup can do all three of those things, right? So this is where you have to be really careful with any of the education, the popular educational frameworks, for lack of a better phrase. You know, you as a teacher, you as a researcher, have to move beyond that and be making decisions based on that framework. And that's why, you know, again, I have a big background in TPAC too, because I did go to Michigan State. The TPAC model is nice because it doesn't just say grab this and go. It's like when I taught TPAC, and again, I don't know if Ty was in the class I taught TPAC, I make them look at what are the affordances of different instructional strategies, different pedagogies. What are the affordances of certain technologies, and what are the needs of content areas? And if you're not matching all three of those up, you know, this need is accomplished through these two affordances, you're not making good decisions about technology integration. That's a really hard, time-consuming thing to do. It's the same thing with Bloom's taxonomy. If your goal is to get them to mash something up across the web, or even mashing up just from a book to an experience they had to this, but you want them to come up with a new to them idea, the same app will allow them to do that in a very substandard and minimal way. So all of these heuristics, all these frameworks are good places to start, but you need to move beyond them and make decisions that are well-informed. And again, creativity, technology, I'll push you back to that technology. So when I say TPAC, for those of you that don't know it, it's technological, pedagogical, content, knowledge that teachers need to integrate technology properly. All the stuff I'm saying about creativity and technology, all the decisions that I just asked you to make about the affordances of a technology, the affordance of a technology, the needs of a content area, need to be made with creativity in mind in order to foster creativity with technology or through technology properly. And again, that takes a little bit of effort. And I can guarantee you, the first time you try it, it probably won't go perfectly. So the concept of iteration, whether it's technology integration or creativity, iteration is wildly important. Fortunately, iteration is so easily accommodated by modern technology, you know, that you can keep track of what you used to do, look at the differences, try to modify something. And that's one of those nanny things, right? Like, I can just have a process journal in Google about a lesson that I've tried 5 times, and I can go back and see all that stuff. It's available to me on my phone, on my iPad, on my computer. I can share it and collaborate with it, and that's a whole nother area we didn't get to talk about. Collaboration is a huge part of the creative process. Right. So I know I'm going too long again here.
Oh, you're fine. Just as long as you put your phone down every once in a while and take a break from that Google Doc, right?
That's right. That's right.
You know, and just if I could maybe put a little bow around this. I mean, I'm hearing you also, and I don't know that you have said the word tonight, but I am hearing you say this. It's about agency. It's about the agency of the teacher and the agency of the student to be able to use technology in thoughtful, meaningful, appropriate ways for themselves. And that's what leads to the creativity. It's not just, oh, here's the next app you have to use. Here's the next website you have to use, those types of things. So great. Yep. Well, thank you so much, Mike. We really appreciate it. The links are over there on the side of the YouTube channel to some of Mike's articles. Some are a little bit difficult to get. They're behind the paywall of databases, but if you have a subscription to a database, or your university or your school does, you should be able to get those. We'll try to get all this typed up and put up in show notes, and those show notes will be available on our website, which, let me remind you of that again, is going to be the edtechcurrents.wordpress.com. And We appreciate your time, Mike. Appreciate everyone who joined in tonight. Just a quick reminder that we will be back 4 weeks from now, March 20th, 2017, same time, 8 p.m. Eastern, to speak with one of our current master's students and also a colleague here at Central Michigan University, Ashley O'Neill, who is the STEM Ed program coordinator here in our Center for Excellence in STEM Education. She works with K-12 students and teachers, getting to do all kinds of cool things like use the 3D printer that's behind her there and other different types of gadgets and gizmos, but all in the service of creative thinking and problem solving related to the STEM fields. So with that in mind, again, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight. If you want to find out more about Mike's work, I sent his Twitter handle out there, DeSchryver, so you'll be able to catch up with him there. Do you have a website or a domain that people could look at in particular? Anything that you'd want them?
Unfortunately, nothing that's up to date enough to be useful.
Okay. Well, we will practice our social scholarship skills and see what we can do to get your website up to date. So
yeah.
Thanks again for being here. Thanks again to everyone who's online with us tonight and to all of you who watch this recording later. I'm Troy Hicks, and this has been EdTech Currents. Good night.
Good night, everybody.